Hi, everyone. I have a poem that I want to share. Happy post President's Day. And it's interesting that on President's Day, a nation holiday that our country celebrates, that I wrote this poem. And I tried to share it on my Facebook Live, but that wasn't working. So you might see me going back and forth about this. And it may be tough. I am not saying that I am flawless. And I'm praying that God will help me to say this with the right spirit, and the right attitude, because I do know, that's important. If you want a title, let's just call this Mr. President. Mr. President, and I put this in quotes. Who is in the Oval Office? This is the subject that has our country divided, and I wonder how far we are going to go. Enough is enough already. As for the name of our country, United States, we are not. Division, a break. We need a break from this division. It seems as if America has become a place unguarded, leaving an opening for intruders to enter in. Nobody seems to be watching because we keep fighting within. When tragedy strikes, what's the next step taken by liberals, conservatives, and commentators? Let the finger pointing begin. Whose fault is this? People blame God. They blame the devil. And lately, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest in Washington, D.C. It's everybody else's fault. We never stop to think, hey, it's me. Everybody seems to be pointing to the point that they cannot see what's about to happen. Our timelines are flooded with memes and themes about other people's flaws. The great American divide has become the great American distraction. Are we praying for our nation? That's the only way that things will change. We can't point and pray at the same time. Otherwise, our prayers will be in vain. While in other nations, locusts fly through the air, destroying acres and acres of land, yet our eyes are steady fixated upon DC that we don't think that the locusts can migrate here. This you must understand. Christians are being persecuted in other nations by systems that people swear will work if it is implemented in these United States. Treating our country like a big sociological experiment. This trial and error hypothesis will prove to have dire consequences if some end up having their way, causing others to suffer while presuming that it will work. But it won't. It will just make matters worse. And then America will have yet another problem on their hands, digging herself deeper and deeper into a hole so low that she will no longer be a great superpower in this land, needing to be rescued only to be lifted up and sold into slavery with no one else to blame because she put herself in chains with every decision she made, all in the name of liberalism. As it says in the Bible, every man doing what is right in his own eyes. In the words of the late John Paul Jackson, you may get what you want, but not like what you get. Yes, this is an element of our time. Happy President's Day. The great American distraction. And I am reminded of a commercial I saw on TV, and I looked it up and saw that it was published in 2010. And we are 10 years in from the date of this publish, from the date of this production. And the commercial is called the Chinese Professor. And it predicted a classroom in 2030. That's 10 years away. So we're 10 years in and 10 years away. And the professor tells his class about why great nations fall, like the Greeks and the Roman Empire. And then he includes the United States of America. He begins to say that, or he continues to say that, America is where it is because of her spending and how, they or she abandoned the principles that she is founded upon. And then at the end of the commercial, he says, "Oh, and now they work for us." And the Chinese class starts laughing. And I wanted to pull out that point about America abandoning her principles that she was founded upon. And it's time, to pray. It's always time to pray. Prayer is the most effective weapon if used properly and in the right manner. It hits its target. And if anybody can do anything about anything, it's the Lord. So I know some may not agree with this piece, but the Bible does say that God puts kings in power and he takes them down. And that we are to pray for our nation and pray for those in authority. And a much harder pill to swallow in our current generation, in our current time, is Romans 13, where it says, "Let every soul be subject to the higher powers, because the higher powers that be are ordained of God. And there is no higher power that is greater than God. And whoever resists this higher power, you're resisting God." And it says leaders are not a terror to good works, but to evil works. They have been put here to execute justice in this land. So, one thing we must know is that when Paul wrote this was during the time where Nero was emperor. And what was he doing to the Christians? He was persecuting them. He put them in a Colosseum with a lion, and they treated killing Christians like a football game, as the crowds cheered on as the lion chased the Christian to his or her death. This is the time where, he treated Christians, he used them as human torches to light the streets of the city. And in the midst of all this, Paul tells the people, he tells them in the book of Romans to submit to authority. You think we have it hard now? Try living back then as a Christian under a leader, like that. And thank God that we live in a nation where we can worship and pray to God in liberty and freedom. In other nations, they don't have that. They have to meet in cellars, and there are people who have been hired to remove crosses from houses of worship overseas. Yet we got it good here in America, as far as having a house of worship, and we complain. We want to be like other nations. And that's what Israel did. They complained. They said, God, before they had leaders, they had judges. But they said, God, we want to be like other nations. We want a king. And so God said, okay. Saul was anointed king in the Old Testament. And he ended up rejecting God because he overstepped his boundaries. He made the sacrifice when he wasn't supposed to. And he did not kill all like God told him to. So, once again, I just gave you a lot to think about, and a lot to pray about. This is Alicia signing off. Have a good night.